My God, this incredible HFY masterpiece found you today. Witness the legend, starting now.
I should have known the humans were trouble the moment Ambassador Vrel decided to grab the small female by her collar. Let me back up. My name is Crix, and I serve as a diplomatic aide aboard the Galactic Council Station Meridian 7. For the past 16 cycles I have witnessed approximately 473 species negotiate treaties, trade agreements, and territorial disputes. I have seen wars prevented, alliances forged, and exactly one incident involving fermented glork juice that we do not discuss in polite company. But never, in all my years of service, had I seen anything quite like what happened when humanity sent their first delegation to our station. The day started normally enough. Well, as normal as it gets when you are expecting the galaxy's newest spacefaring species to arrive for their inaugural diplomatic summit. The humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 6 months prior, which by galactic standards made them the equivalent of toddlers stumbling into a board meeting of corporate executives. I was standing in the grand reception hall, a space so massive it could comfortably hold 17 battlecruisers, when the human shuttle docked. The hall was packed. Representatives from over 200 species had gathered, curiosity outweighing their usual diplomatic obligation. Everyone wanted to see the infamous humans, the species that had somehow managed to survive on a death world classified as extreme hazard level 9. The doors opened with a hydraulic hiss. 5 humans walked in. The first thing I noticed was how small they were. Average height by galactic standards perhaps, but their frame seemed almost fragile compared to the armored bulk of a Thorian or the crystalline mass of a Prexian. They wore matching dark blue uniforms, simple and unadorned, with small patches on their shoulders depicting a blue and green planet. The second thing I noticed was their eyes. By the 7 moons, their eyes. They moved constantly, scanning, assessing, cataloging everything around them with an intensity that made my secondary stomach clench. The leader stepped forward. His designation was Captain James Morrison, according to the dossier I had memorized. Mid-40s by human reckoning, with short gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from the same stubborn stone as his planet. He smiled, showing those distinctive human teeth, and extended his hand toward Ambassador Vrel of the Zynthian Collective. Tall, proud, with skin that shimmered like oil on water and a sense of self-importance that could fill a solar system. The Zynthians were one of the founding members of the Galactic Council, and Vrel never let anyone forget it. Vrel looked at the extended hand with the same expression one might reserve for examining a particularly suspicious fungus. He did not take it. Humans, Vrel said, his translator rendering his words in that characteristic nasal tone that made everything sound like a complaint. You are late. Morrison's smile did not waver. Our apologies, Ambassador. We had a minor navigation issue. First time using the station's docking protocols. Incompetence. Vrel sniffed. Typical of primitive species. Perhaps you are not ready for membership in civilized galactic society. The other humans behind Morrison stiffened slightly. I noticed the smallest one, a young female with dark hair pulled back in what humans call a ponytail. Narrow her eyes. Her name was Lieutenant Maya Foster, according to my note. 26 years old, exobiologist, and currently looking at Vrel like she was calculating exactly which of his internal organs would be most painful to remove. But Morrison just laughed. An actual, genuine laugh that echoed through the hall. You might be right, Ambassador, he said cheerfully. We are pretty new at this. Fortunately, we are quick learners. This seemed to mollify Vrel somewhat. He gestured with one of his forearms. Come. We have prepared accommodations for your delegation. Tomorrow we will discuss the terms of your potential admission to the council. The humans followed, and I trailed behind as part of my duties. The crowd in the hall slowly dispersed, though I could hear the whispers and see the gestures. Everyone had opinions about humanity. Some were curious, others were dismissed. A few, like the Crithian representative I passed, looked actively hostile. Mammals, the Crithian hissed to his companion. Emotional, irrational, they will not last 3 cycles before starting a war. I kept my thoughts to myself, but privately I agreed. The galaxy had seen plenty of aggressive young species before. Most either learned their place or were put in it. Humanity would be no different, or so I thought. The accommodations provided for the human delegation were on level 47, in a section typically reserved for visiting diplomats from outer rim systems. Modest, but comfortable. I helped them get settled, answered their questions about station operations, and tried not to stare at how strangely they moved. Humans walk with a bounce, like their planet has lighter gravity than it actually does. Later I would learn this was because they evolved as persistence hunters, built to run down prey over vast distances until it collapsed from exhaustion. Terrifying? Yes. Useful information? Not at the time. Over the next few hours, I watched the humans explore their quarters with systematic thoroughness. They examined every panel, tested every system, and took notes on everything. Lieutenant Foster, in particular, seemed fascinated by the environmental controls, peppering me with questions about atmospheric composition and pressure regulation that made my head spin. "This is incredible," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "You can support over 300 different atmospheric types simultaneously. The engineering required for that is beyond anything we have back home." I felt a small surge of pride. Yes, the station was constructed over a period of 80 years by a coalition of 12 species. It is considered one of the great achievements of cooperative galactic civilization. 80 years, she murmured. "We built the International Space Station in about 10 years. But that was just for humans in low Earth orbit. This is orders of magnitude more complex." I had no idea what an International Space Station was, but I appreciated her recognition of our accomplishment. Captain Morrison spent most of his time reviewing documents on a portable datapad, occasionally asking his team members for their input. The other 3 humans, Lieutenants David Park, Rachel Stone and Marcus White, busied themselves with various tasks. They seemed efficient, professional, and remarkably calm for representatives of a species making first contact with a galactic civilization. Maybe, I thought, they would surprise everyone. Maybe they would be different from the typical aggressive newcomers. Then the banquet happened. The welcome banquet was a tradition dating back centuries, a formal dinner where new species were introduced to the major players in galactic politics. It was held in the Azure Dining Hall, a sprawling space with tables arranged in concentric circles around a central platform. The lighting was kept dim to accommodate species with sensitive vision, and the air was filled with the murmur of 100 different languages filtered through translators. The humans arrived precisely on time, still in their simple blue uniforms. I noticed they had politely declined the ceremonial robes offered to them, citing unfamiliarity with proper wearing procedures. Smart. Better to appear humble than accidentally commit a cultural faux pas with a garment. Ambassador Vrel was already seated at the head table, along with representatives from the other founding council species. The Thorians, massive and armored. The Prexians, towering and angular. The Helexians, flowing and graceful. And the Korthan, compact and intense. Morrison led his delegation to their assigned table near the outer ring. Not an insult exactly, but certainly not a position of honor. The humans sat without complaint. The meal began. Dishes from dozens of worlds circulated on floating platforms, each one carefully prepared to be safe for the various species present. The humans examined each offering with scientific curiosity, using small scanning devices to check for compatibility before cautiously sampling items that registered as non-toxic. "Interesting," Foster murmured, trying something that looked like purple gelatin but probably was not. Amino acid structure is similar to Earth proteins, but the chirality is reversed. Nutritious, but our bodies would not be able to metabolize it efficiently. "Eat the blue items," I whispered helpfully. "We ensured those were compatible with human biochemistry." She gave me a grateful smile. "Thank you, Crix." The dinner progressed smoothly for about 30 minutes. Speeches were made, welcomes extended, and the usual diplomatic pleasantries exchanged. The humans listened attentively, their translator devices converting the various languages into English in real time. Then Ambassador Vrel stood to make his address. "My fellow council members," he began, his voice carrying across the hall. "We gather tonight to welcome humanity to our galactic community. A young species, naive and untested, but one that shows promise. Perhaps with proper guidance from more advanced civilizations, they may one day earn a place among us." I winced. Vrel was not known for his tact, but this was condescending even by his standards. Morrison's expression remained pleasant, but I saw Foster's jaw tighten. Vrel continued. "Of course, we must be realistic. Humans come from a world of violence and chaos. Their history is one of constant warfare, tribal conflicts, and self-destruction. They have only just stopped killing each other long enough to reach for the star." Now all 5 humans had gone very still. It was subtle, but their body language shifted. Shoulders squared, hands resting flat on tables, eyes focused with laser intensity on Vrel. "It will be our responsibility," Vrel droned on, seemingly oblivious, "to teach them civilization. To show them that brute force and primitive aggression have no place in a society governed by reason and law." Captain Morrison stood slowly. The movement was not threatening, but every eye in the hall turned toward him. "Ambassador Vrel," Morrison said, his voice carrying a polite tone that somehow felt dangerous. "May I respond?" Vrel looked surprised. "This is not typically part of the ceremony, but very well. Speak, human. Morrison walked to the center of the hall, his team watching him with expressions that might have been concern or might have been anticipation. I could not tell. You are correct that humanity has a violent history, Morrison began. We have fought wars. Terrible wars. Wars that killed millions and nearly destroyed our planet multiple times. We are not proud of that history. But we learned from it. He paused, looking around the hall at the assembled aliens. We learned that differences in appearance, belief, and culture are not reasons for hatred. We learned that cooperation achieves more than conflict. We learned that protecting the weak, speaking for the voiceless, and standing against tyranny are not primitive instincts but the foundations of true civilization. Vrel's shimmer flickered with irritation. Noble words, Captain. But words are easy. Actions matter. What have you actually achieved? Morrison smiled, and there was something predatory in it. Would you like a list, Ambassador? Before Vrel could respond, Foster stood and activated a holographic projector. Images filled the air above the tables. I recognized them from the humans' preliminary data submission, but seeing them now, in context, hit differently. This is Earth, Foster said, her voice clear and strong. 150 years ago, our planet was divided into nearly 200 competing nations. We had weapons capable of destroying our entire biosphere multiple times over. Our climate was collapsing. Our oceans were dying. Extinction rates were catastrophic. By every reasonable measure, we should have destroyed ourselves. The images shifted. Cities gleaming under sunlight. Forests thick and green. Oceans teeming with life. But we did not. We chose differently. We dismantled our weapons of mass destruction. We reversed climate change. We restored ecosystems. We united our world under a single democratic government that respects cultural diversity while ensuring basic rights for all humans. Impressive propaganda, Vrel said, dismissively. But your own files show you achieved spaceflight less than 2 centuries ago. Many species in this hall have been traveling the stars for millennia. What do you possibly have to teach us? Lieutenant Park stood, his expression serious. Survival, Ambassador. We have survived things that would destroy most species. Asteroid impacts, supervolcanoes, ice ages, plagues that killed half our population. We have been to the brink of extinction at least 6 times in our history, and every single time we clawed our way back. The hall had gone very quiet. Even the usual background chatter of translators had faded to whisper. More than that, Park continued, we learned to turn our worst traits into our greatest strength. Our aggression became determination. Our tribalism became loyalty. Our stubbornness became perseverance. You call us primitive, but we prefer the term adaptive. Ambassador Vrel's shimmer was now flickering rapidly, a sign of agitation in Xinthians. This is all very touching, but it does not change the fact that you are newcomers to a galaxy that operates by established rules and protocols. You will follow them, or you will find yourselves isolated and irrelevant. And that was when Lieutenant Foster made her mistake. Or perhaps it was not a mistake. I am still not entirely sure. Foster stepped toward Vrel, her posture confident. With respect, Ambassador, we are not asking for charity or special treatment. We are here to be evaluated on our merits. If you have concerns about human civilization, then ask us. Test, but do not presume to judge us based on your own biases and prejudices. The hall erupted in whispers. Several species considered such direct confrontation with a council ambassador to be gravely insulting. I saw Vrel's shimmer turn a deep angry purple. You dare speak to me in such a manner? Vrel hissed. Am ambassador to the Galactic Council. I have negotiated treaties that shaped the galaxy while your species was still living in caves. Foster did not back down. And we respect your experience, Ambassador. But respect works both ways. You can teach us about the galaxy, and perhaps we can teach you something about humility. That did it. Vrel moved faster than I had ever seen a Xinthian move. One of his 4 arms shot out, and his hand, with its 3 long fingers, grabbed Foster by the collar of her uniform. He lifted her slightly, her feet barely touching the floor. You will learn your place, human. Vrel snarled, his translator barely keeping up with his rapid, angry speech. You will learn that your species is nothing. You are insects. You are dust. You will bow to your betters, or you will be crushed beneath the weight of civilizations that existed before your ancestors learned to make fire. The hall fell absolutely, completely, utterly silent. Every single being in that room froze, because we all knew what we were seeing. Physical assault of a diplomatic representative. On Council Station, during a formal banquet, it was perhaps the most severe violation of diplomatic protocol possible. Wars had started over less, but that was not why everyone had gone silent. They had gone silent because of what the humans were doing. All 4 of the remaining humans had stood. Their movements were synchronized, precise, and absolutely terrifying in their controlled intensity. They did not rush forward. They did not shout. They simply stood, hands at their sides, bodies coiled like springs, and stared at Rel with expressions that could only be described as murderously calm. Captain Morrison's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Ambassador Vrel, release her. Now." There was no anger in his tone, no rage, just absolute, unshakable certainty. Vrel seemed to realize what he had done. His shimmer flickered between purple and a sickly yellow-green. His hand released Foster's collar, and she dropped lightly to her feet, adjusting her uniform with deliberate care. Vrel began, but Morrison cut him off. "Lieutenant Foster, are you injured?" "No, sir," she replied calmly. "I am fine. Good." Morrison looked around the hall, making eye contact with every major species representative present. "I want everyone here to understand something. We came to this station in good faith. We came to learn, to grow, to become part of your galactic community. We have listened to your condescension, your insults and your presumptions with patience and grace." He took a step toward Vrel, and despite the size difference between humans and Xinthians, somehow Morrison seemed larger. "But understand this clearly," Morrison continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "We will not tolerate physical aggression against any member of our delegation. Not from an ambassador. Not from anyone. If you want to judge humanity, then judge us on our actions. And our action right now is to give you one chance to make this right." Vrel's shimmer was now almost entirely yellow-green, the color of fear in his species. I apologize, I lost my composure. The human female, Lieutenant Foster. She was disrespectful, but I should not have responded with physical contact." "No," Morrison agreed. "You should not have." The silence stretched. I could feel the tension in the room like a physical presence, pressing down on everyone. The other council ambassadors were watching with expressions ranging from shock to calculation. The Thorian representative looked almost amused. The Prexian seemed appalled. The Helixian's colors were shifting rapidly, indicating distress. The Korthan was utterly still, his small dark eyes missing nothing. Then Foster did something that surprised everyone. She stepped forward and extended her hand toward Vrel. "Apology accepted, Ambassador," she said quietly. "We all make mistakes. The measure of civilization is not perfection, but how we handle our failures." Vrel stared at the extended hand for a long moment. Then hesitantly he reached out with one of his 4 arms and grasped it. The sight was awkward, a human handshake adapted for Xinthian anatomy, but somehow it worked. The hall began to breathe again. Conversations resumed, though much more subdued than before. Several representatives approached the human delegation, some to offer support, others to introduce themselves properly for the first time. I stood there, my 3 legs trembling slightly, and realized something profound. The galaxy had just changed. We thought we were meeting a young, naive species that would need guidance and instruction. We thought we were welcoming children to an adult's world, but watching those 5 humans maintain their composure, defend their dignity without resorting to violence, and offer forgiveness when they could have demanded retribution, I understood something fundamental about humanity that our data files and reports had never captured. They were not children. They were survivors. Warriors who had learned when not to fight. Diplomats who understood that strength without wisdom was just brutality. And as I watched Captain Morrison return to his table, his team around him, their unity and purpose clear in every gesture and glance, I had one single terrifying thought. The galaxy was not ready for humanity. But ready or not, here they were, and tomorrow, when the formal negotiations began, everything was going to change. I just hoped we would all survive the experience. The next morning began with what humans apparently call a hangover, though I was not the one who had been drinking. Ambassador Vrel sent me to his quarters at the start of the cycle with instructions to prepare his briefing materials for the formal negotiations. I found him in his meditation chamber, his shimmer a sickly gray color surrounded by empty containers of Xinthian relaxation fluid. "Crix," he said without looking at me, "I have made a catastrophic error." This was not the confident, arrogant Vrel I had served for 6 years. This was a politician who had just realized he had stepped on a mine that had not exploded yet, but absolutely would. "The incident last night," I began carefully, "is already circulating through every diplomatic channel in the galaxy," he finished. "By midday, the Council of Elders on my homeworld will have seen the recording. By evening, formal censure proceedings will likely begin." I said nothing. There was nothing to say. He was probably right. "The humans," Vrel continued, his voice quiet. "They could have destroyed me last night. One word to the Oversight Committee about physical assault, and my career would have ended instantly. Instead, their female lieutenant accepted my apology and moved on as though nothing had happened. Perhaps they understand politics better than we assumed, I offered. No. Rel's shimmer flickered. They understand something far more dangerous. They understand mercy. And mercy given is debt owed. Whether the recipient wants it or not, he was not wrong. In galactic politics, forgiveness was often more binding than any contract. What will you do, Ambassador? What I should have done from the beginning. Treat them as equals, and pray to the Seven Suns that they actually want what they claim to want. Because if humanity has ulterior motives, we just handed them leverage on a quantum platter. I left him there, and made my way to the negotiation chambers on level 12. The formal talks were scheduled to begin in 2 standard hours, and I needed to ensure everything was prepared. As I walked through the station's corridors, I could not help but notice the change in atmosphere. Every screen, every data port, every communication hub was buzzing with footage and analysis of last night's banquet. I saw the moment replayed dozens of times, Rel grabbing Foster's collar. The humans standing as one, Morrison's cold, controlled response, Foster's extended hand of forgiveness. The commentary was split. Some species saw humanity's restraint as wisdom. Others saw it as weakness. A few, like the Krethians, were openly mocking what they called human cowardice for not immediately retaliating, but there were other voices too. Quieter ones. Analysts and historians pointing out patterns. One Helixian commentator noted that humanity's response perfectly matched their documented behavior during their own planetary unification. Faced with provocation, they had consistently chosen de-escalation until no other option remained, at which point their response had been swift and absolute. The question, the commentator said, her color shifting thoughtfully, is not whether humans will fight. Their entire history proves they excel at warfare. The question is what it takes to make them fight. And whether we want to discover that threshold. I reached the negotiation chambers and began setting up. The room was designed for maximum flexibility, with adjustable gravity, atmosphere and seating configurations. Today it was set for standard parameters, 1.2 gravities, oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere, comfortable for most species. The human delegation arrived early, all 5 of them looking remarkably fresh despite the previous night's drama. They wore the same blue uniforms, though I noticed each one had added small personal touches. Foster had a pin on her collar depicting Earth's moon. Park wore a bracelet made of woven metal. Stone had a small patch on her shoulder showing a bird in flight. White had modified his boots with additional grip treads. And Morrison carried a battered notebook, actual paper and ink. An antique even by human standards. Good morning, Crix, Morrison said warmly. Is there anything we should know about today's format? The Council will present a series of scenarios and questions, I explained. They are designed to assess how humanity would handle various diplomatic, ethical, and practical situations. Your responses will help determine your classification and privileges within galactic society. Essentially a test, Foster said. Essentially. We are good at tests, White added with a slight smile. The Council representatives began arriving. First the Thorians, their armored bulk making the floor vibrate. Then the Prexians, angular and precise. The Helixians flowed in like living art. The Korthon entered silently, as was their way. And finally Ambassador Vrel, his shimmer now a carefully controlled neutral blue. Vrel took his seat at the head of the curved table. Shall we begin? The negotiations lasted 7 hours. I have attended thousands of diplomatic sessions, but I had never seen anything quite like this. The Council started with softball questions, basic stuff about human government, resource management and cultural values. Morrison and his team answered clearly and concisely, providing exactly the information requested without unnecessary elaboration. Then they moved to hypothetical scenarios. Suppose, the Thorian representative rumbled, his translated voice like grinding rocks, that your exploration vessel encounters a primitive species on a pre-industrial world. They possess resources you need. How do you proceed? Morrison did not hesitate. We would not make contact. Galactic law, as we understand it, prohibits interference with pre-spaceflight civilizations. We would note the location and move on, even if your crew was dying and those resources could save them. The Thorian pressed. Even then, Morrison confirmed. We do not believe our need justifies violating another species' natural development. We would find another solution or accept the consequences of our choices. The Prexian spoke next, her voice crystalline and sharp. But you are a young species. Your technology is limited. Another spacefaring civilization could harvest those resources without violating the primitives. Would you purchase from them? Now Morrison paused, and I saw his team exchange glances. It was Foster who answered. No, she said. That would make us complicit in the violation. If the law has a moral foundation and we believe it does, then circumventing it through a third party still breaks the spirit of that law. Even if your people died, the Prexian insisted. Even then, Foster repeated quietly. One of our oldest principles is that the ends do not justify the means. We have learned, painfully, that abandoning ethics for expedience leads to darkness. The Helixian shifted colors, intrigued. Yet your history shows numerous examples of exactly such abandonment. Your wars, your colonial periods, your environmental destruction. Yes, Morrison agreed. And every one of those examples taught us why we should not repeat them. We are not claiming moral superiority, we are claiming moral education, purchased at terrible cost. The questions continued, growing progressively more complex and challenging. Trade disputes, territorial conflicts, refugee crises, military interventions. Each scenario was designed to probe human ethics, logic, and priorities. What struck me was not just their answers, but how they arrived at them. The humans frequently paused to consult each other, debating points in quiet voices before presenting a unified response. They disagreed openly within their team, but always respectfully, and once a decision was made they all supported it. Then the Korthan spoke for the first time, his voice soft but carrying unusual weight. "I have a different question," he said. "It is personal, not hypothetical." Morrison nodded. "We will answer if we can. Last night Ambassador Vrel assaulted one of your delegates. By rights, you could have demanded his removal, possibly even charges under station law. Instead, you accepted his apology and moved forward. Why?" The room went very still. This was the question everyone wanted answered, but none had dared ask directly. Foster leaned forward slightly. "Because punishment was not our goal, Ambassador. We came here to build relationships, not win battles." Vrel made a mistake in a moment of anger. "We have all done that. Destroying his career would not have served our interests or his, and it certainly would not have improved human-Xinthian relations. But you demonstrated weakness." A Krithian observer interjected from the side of the room. "You showed that humans can be physically intimidated without consequence." Morrison's expression did not change, but his eyes went very cold. "No. We showed that we can differentiate between a genuine threat and a momentary lapse in judgment. If we believed Vrel was actually dangerous, our response would have been very different." "How different?" the Krithian challenged. "Different enough that we would not be having this conversation today," Morrison said flatly. "Because the banquet hall would have been repurposed as a medical facility." The silence that followed was profound. There was no bravado in Morrison's tone, no anger, just simple statement of fact, which somehow made it more terrifying. The Korthan made a sound that might have been approval. "You choose your battles carefully. This is wisdom. This is survival," Morrison corrected. "Fighting is easy. Knowing when not to fight is hard. We learned that lesson after nearly destroying ourselves in 3 world wars." "3? The Prexian said sharply. "Your files only mention 2 major global conflicts." Morrison's smile was grim. "The third one never quite reached global status, but it killed 80 million people over 40 years through proxy wars, espionage, and brinkmanship. We call it the Cold War. It taught us that being right is not enough. You also have to be wise." The negotiations continued, but I noticed a shift in the Council's demeanor. They were no longer testing the humans to find weaknesses. They were testing to understand capabilities. There was a difference, subtle but significant. Then we reached the final scenario presented by Vrel himself. "Suppose," Vrel began, his shimmer carefully neutral, "that humanity is admitted to the Council. 6 months later you discover that one of the founding species, let us say hypothetically the Xinthians, has been secretly violating the law against interfering with primitive worlds. You have proof, undeniable evidence. What do you do?" This was a loaded question, and everyone knew it. Accusing a founding species was political suicide, but ignoring violations undermined the entire legal framework. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "May I ask a clarifying question?" "Of course. In this scenario, are the Xinthians interfering for profit, for research, or for what they believe is the primitive's benefit?" Vrel's shimmer flickered with surprise. "Does it matter?" "Very much. Intent informs approach. If for profit, that is exploitation and should be stopped immediately. If for research, that is still wrong but suggests ignorance rather than malice. If they believe they are helping, then they are, from a human perspective, engaging in what we call colonialism, the most insidious form of interference because it disguises itself as benevolence. Let us say they believe they are helping," Vrel said quietly. Morrison nodded slowly. "Then I would first come to them privately with the evidence. I would explain why their actions, however well-intentioned, violate the rights of the primitive species to self-determination. I would appeal to their ethics, their sense of justice, their own history of development, and if they refuse to stop, then I would go public with the evidence. Not to destroy them, but to force accountability. Because laws that only apply to the weak are not laws. They are tyranny with paperwork, even if it meant making a powerful enemy. Vrel pressed. Morrison met his eyes steadily. Especially then. Because if we compromise our principles for convenience, we lose the right to claim we have principles at all. The room erupted, not in anger, but in argument. Half a dozen species began debating simultaneously, their translators working overtime. The Thorians approved loudly. The Prexians expressed logical agreement. The Helixians shifted colors rapidly, indicating complex emotional processing. Even the Crithians seemed grudgingly impressed. But it was Vrel's reaction that surprised me most. His shimmer cycled through a dozen colors before settling on a deep, peaceful blue I had never seen from him before. That, he said quietly, barely audible over the chaos, was the correct answer. I stared at him. Ambassador, the scenario was not hypothetical, Vrel said, looking directly at Morrison. 17 years ago, my government initiated a cultural guidance program on 3 pre-industrial worlds. We believed we were helping them avoid the mistakes we made in our development. We believed we were saving lives. The room fell silent again as everyone turned to stare at Vrel. 5 years ago, I discovered the program's existence through classified documents. I have spent the past 5 years trying to end it through internal political channels. I have failed. The program continued. Morrison's expression softened slightly. Why are you telling us this? Because I needed to know if humanity would be an ally or an enemy in fighting it. Because I needed to know if you meant what you said about principles, or if you were simply saying what you thought we wanted to hear. Vrel stood, and his shimmer was now brilliant, almost painful to look at. And because I am tired of being the only voice in my government speaking against this wrong, I am tired of politics mattering more than ethics. And after last night, after you showed me mercy I did not deserve, I realized that perhaps the galaxy needs what humanity brings, not your technology, not your resources, your moral clarity. He turned to address the full council. I move that humanity be granted provisional membership in the Galactic Council, with full voting rights and all associated privileges. I further move that their first assignment be to join me in investigating and dismantling the Zynthian Cultural Guidance Program. The Thorian representative stood. I second the motion. The vote was called. It was not unanimous. The Crithians abstained, and 2 minor species voted against, but it passed with overwhelming support. Humanity was in, and their first act as council members would be to hold one of the founding species accountable for breaking the law. It was either the beginning of a new era of galactic justice, or the spark that would tear the council apart. Honestly, I was not sure which possibility terrified me more. The celebration that followed was subdued but genuine. Representatives came to congratulate the humans, many asking questions about Earth, human culture, and humanity's plans. Morrison and his team handled it with the same calm professionalism they had shown throughout. I found myself standing next to Lieutenant Foster as the crowd began to disperse. How does it feel? I asked. Your species just became the youngest member of the Galactic Council in recorded history. She smiled, but her eyes were distant. Honestly, Crix, terrifying. We came here expecting to be turned away, to be told to come back in 50 years after we proved ourselves. Instead, we are being handed responsibility and authority we barely understand. You could have refused. No, she said softly. We could not. Because Vrella was right. If we claim to have principles, we have to be willing to defend them, even when it is hard. Especially when it is hard. She looked at me with those intense human eyes. Can I ask you something? Of course. What did you think when Vrel grabbed my collar last night? In that moment, before everything else happened, what went through your mind? I considered the question carefully. I thought we were about to witness the end of human-galactic relations. I thought your delegation would respond with violence, or at minimum storm out in protest. I thought decades of potential cooperation were ending before they could begin. And now? Now I think I understand why your species survived when so many others would have perished. You fight when you must, but you think before you fight. You feel anger, but you do not let anger control you. You are strong but not fragile. Confident, but not arrogant. I paused, then added, you are exactly what the galaxy needs, even if we do not realize it yet. Foster's smile widened. Thank you, Crix. That means more than you know. Captain Morrison approached, his notebook tucked under one arm. Lieutenant, we need to prepare our report for Earth Command. This is going to cause quite a stir back home. One question before you go. I said quickly. Your planet, your species, your whole civilization. You came so close to destroying yourselves so many times. What ultimately saved you? What made the difference between extinction and survival? Morrison was quiet for a moment, then said, Hope, I think. No matter how dark things got, there were always humans who believed we could be better, who fought for that better future, who refused to give up. He looked around the negotiation chamber, at the empty seats where representatives from hundreds of species had sat. And maybe that is what we bring to the galaxy. Not superior technology or tactics, or resources. Just the stubborn, possibly insane belief that things can always be better, that mistakes can be learned from, that enemies can become friends, that darkness can be pushed back, even when the odds are impossible. Morrison's smile was fierce and wild and absolutely human. Especially then, because humans, we do not know how to quit. They left shortly after, the five of them walking together down the corridor, already deep in discussion about next steps. I watched them go and felt something I had not experienced in years of diplomatic service. Optimism? The galaxy was entering uncharted territory. The old powers were being challenged. The comfortable assumptions were cracking. Change was coming. Rapid and unstoppable. And at the center of it all was a species that had barely learned to walk among the stars, already running full speed into problems that had festered for centuries. It was going to be chaos. It was going to be glorious, and I could not wait to see what happened next. Ambassador Vel found me later that evening as I was filing the day's reports. Crix, he said, his shimmer a contemplative purple-blue. I need to ask you something. Yes. Ambassador, do you think I made the right choice? Admitting humanity to the Council? Exposing my government's crimes? Betting everything on a species we barely know? I looked at him. This proud, flawed being who had spent 5 years trying to do the right thing alone, and I smiled. Ambassador, humans have a saying. In for a penny, in for a pound. I do not fully understand it, but I believe it means that once you commit to a course of action, you commit fully, and you have committed. We all have. Humanity is here now. They are not going anywhere. So the question is not whether you made the right choice. The question is what we do next. Rel's shimmer brightened slightly. What we do next is survive the consequences of inviting chaos into our ordered galaxy. Perhaps, I agreed. Or perhaps we discover that a little chaos is exactly what a stagnant civilization needs. He laughed, a bubbling sound I had heard maybe twice in 6 years. You are either very wise or very foolish, Crix. With respect, Ambassador, is there really a difference? No, he said, still chuckling. No, I suppose there is not. He left, and I returned to my reports. But I could not focus. My mind kept returning to the humans, to their restraint and their passion, their wisdom and their stubborn hope. The galaxy had spent millennia building a careful, delicate, balanced system of laws, treaties, and protocols. It worked, mostly, but it was fragile. A strong wind could shatter it. Humanity was not a strong wind. Humanity was a hurricane, and the storm had just made landfall. I finished my reports, closed down my workstation, and made my way to my quarters. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new crises, new impossibilities that somehow needed to become possible. But tonight I allowed myself to feel something I had not felt in a very long time. Excitement. Because whatever else humanity was, whatever chaos they brought, whatever problems they solved or created, one thing was absolutely certain. The galaxy would never be boring again. And for a career diplomat who had spent decades watching the same political plays repeat with different actors, that was perhaps the greatest gift imaginable. The humans were here, and everything was about to change.